So just a little bit background on our speaker. Marisa runs a company called Enneagram and You. If those of you guys are on social media, you can search that on Instagram. She has a website as well, right? And she'll talk more about that. So Marisa is a human services professional with a specialty in coaching for personalities and relationships. She holds a master's degree, from Regent University and from the College of Psychology and Counselling. She has extensive training in the Enneagram and personality development, and she has trained and coached hundreds of clients across North America, families, teams, and conferences. So part one tonight is kind of a general overview on the different types, and she'll talk more about that. I hope by the end of the night you guys can figure out your number, or at least have the skills to figure that out. Part two next week, so if you haven't registered for next week, make sure you go on your smartphone or whatever, your pager, whatever you use, and you register for part two next week. It's going to be on challenge, so how you can better relate with people, confronting unhealthy patterns in your life of thinking and those kind of things. And then finally, part three is on relationships. So if you're dating, married, friendships, really for anybody, that's going to be the final week, and that will be on the 18th. With that, let's give a warm welcome to our speaker tonight, Marisa Aud.
Thank you, Josh. Do you want your phone? Just in case. So good to be with you all. Let's see those hands again. Who knows their type? All right. Excellent. So hopefully tonight we'll confirm all of the things that you feel and know about yourself. Like Josh shared, my name is Marisa. I am a certified Enneagram coach, and my master's is actually in coaching. I know that many people claim to be coaches, and we'll just leave it at that. But I do have education in coaching, and the reason why I chose coaching over counseling is because of my Enneagram type. I would safely assume I, like Josh, am a 7. And if you don't know anything about 7s, sounds like we don't have very many in the room tonight, which is completely okay. 7s are very future-oriented. Sorry, I have a cough drop. And I would say that is a very unique aspect of coaching. Coaching is when you have a goal and you want to meet that goal, so you take steps forward. Whereas counseling and therapy can often have you looking back. Now, we will do some of that tonight, just because of the nature of some of Enneagram work. It causes you to reflect. It causes you to think about your own history and experiences, which is all a very, very healthy thing. But as a 7, I just want to help people and cheer people on. So that's a little bit about me. I'll show you on Instagram. That's sort of what my profile looks like, that logo there. Would love, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me through that. It's just at Enneagram and You, and it's just me running it, so nobody else is going to see your questions or messages. So, so I've been studying the Enneagram for a while, and it's a lot of fun. It's very helpful in what we call interpersonal neurobiology, and that is just a fancy way of saying the way that we connect with others, the behavior that we recognize when we interact with others. Interpersonal neurobiology. It's kind of fascinating. I think it's one of the unique qualities and ways that the Enneagram is sort of set apart from the rest of assessments, like Myers-Briggs. What is that 4-letter one? Can anybody think of it? Bonus points if you can think of it. DISC, yes. I was going to say DART. Too many acronyms where I work. But DISC, yes. All of these assessments are super, super helpful. But the wonderful thing about the Enneagram is that it helps us see how the way that we are, things seen and things unknown to us or subconscious behaviors, affect others and affect our relationships. Because there's only 9 types, really there's like 367 or something. But basically there are 9 types. It's easy for all of us to learn each type, and it's really important that we learn each type, not just our own. I think the beauty of the Enneagram is learning it in community and not in isolation. If you're just learning it in isolation or for the sake of knowing more about the way you're wired, that's beautiful, that's wonderful. But really where the magic happens is in community, when you begin to see your relationships flourish. And the way that can happen is having conversations that you never dreamt were possible. The Enneagram gives us a language to have those difficult conversations without making it super personal. And I think that's some of the hesitation that we have around having difficult conversations, is that vulnerability is one thing, but making it personal or being offensive is another. And you're going to see tonight, if this is your first time learning about all the types, there are certain types that definitely pull back from confrontation. Maybe this is too heavy of a question to start off, but how many of you here tonight would admit that you hate confrontation? Yeah, I know. You do? Excellent. That's such a good thing to know. These are the kinds of questions we have to be comfortable with asking ourselves and probably one another, to get to that next level. Essentially, that's kind of what we're going to dig into tonight. So I really want this to be a focus on listening to what's happening on the inside of each of us and listening to one another. I think that's where the health comes. So we are gonna do a brief overview of all 9 types. This is normally a 10-hour class that I would teach, either over 10 weeks or like a day and a half. So there's just so many layers we could attack with Enneagram, as many of you probably already know. So we're just gonna pick a few aspects that I feel are really critical for owning your type. Like if you felt like, I kind of know my type, but I'm kind of not so sure, I really hope that after tonight you'll be feeling like, okay, I've locked it in. And if not, I'm really close. I'm really, really close. Some of these things do take time. I'll tell you for myself. I lived as a 3 for many, how many months do you think? This is my husband in the front row. 8-9 months. Yeah. And some of these things are just like an onion. It just takes time and layers peeling back and really our openness, right? So if it doesn't happen for you tonight, that's completely okay. Some of it is more art than science, just like any good diagnosis, right? We need time to really reveal all of the things that are below the surface, okay? So be patient with yourself. We are going to look at core fears. That's a critical component of types. I cannot tell you how many people I've met with who would come to a workshop just like this, and then they would meet with me in my office and say, oh yes, I am all of those things, except that core fear doesn't really resonate with me. And then I would just sit there and say, well, we might need to go back and look again at some other numbers that you think you might be, because if the core fear does not resonate, then it's probably not your type. It's a very important component of identifying your type. And we're going to look at or unpack what those core fears reveal. And we don't want to hinge too much importance on the Enneagram. It is a great tool. It is not the only tool. I think it's really beneficial right now because society is really open to it. It's a really interesting thing. But I think it's not the be-all and end-all of who you are. So if your personality, your wiring, your experiences doesn't line up completely with the ways that I describe it tonight, or some place that you hear it or read it in a book, that's okay. That's your experience. It's going to be very unique. It's there's so many elements that can play into how your number expresses. But that core fear, it is kind of important, pretty important. And then finally, we're going to tackle the centers of intelligence. Now, really, we should start at the end. The centers of intelligence are how you take in information. So how you process. Is it through feelings? Is it through your gut? You need to get out there and do something, or you have anger about it and that makes you feel alive. Maybe you love confrontation. Or, do you have to think about how you're feeling? Does it take you some time to process and analyze and come to a decision? All of those little nuanced things are very, very important in discovering your type. Please feel free to raise your hand and ask a question if you need clarification. I know we have varying levels of comfort with the Enneagram, and it's a dynamic tool, and it can be very technical. So if I've said something that you're not quite sure about, please raise your hand. All right? So let's just do a quick overview. I have some descriptors beside each type, and you may have heard them before. Maybe they're brand new to you. I would suggest that you not hinge too much importance on the name of each number. The reason being is that many of us, from the time we're very small, may have been called one of these names. So for instance, number 2 is often known as the helper. And many children are, referred to as mommy's little helper, or you're such a good helper, or I'm not sure how you are, spoken of at work, but we can often align with the names that people have attributed to us. And I do want to encourage you to just kind of separate yourself from that if you can. I know it's hard, but we just want to look at the types for what they really are, okay? So starting with 1 is often known as the perfectionist. I prefer to describe it as the improver, because no perfectionist ever accepts the fact that they're a perfectionist until they really accept it. But they will accept the fact that they will walk into a room and like to improve upon things or improve upon a chart. And that is much easier to accept. So 1, they have a fear of being corrupt. And so they want to be good. They want to be morally upright and do the right thing. They want others to see them that way as well. 2, as we said, is known as the helper often, but I like to think of them as a supporter, because sometimes it means that they're in the front, and sometimes it means they are, just like it sounds, supporting others. They are others-oriented. They often do not know what they need emotionally, and they can often feel like that's a bit of an invasion of privacy to be asked, what can I do for you? It's like, whoa. Like there's almost a visceral response sometimes from 2s. Like that is a very private question for you to ask me. How can you help me? How dare you? They might not say it in those words, but that they might have that feeling like, oh, that's a little, I'm not ready to share that with you. And that's completely okay. 3 is, what do I have there? The achiever. So 3s are very driven to success, to win. They can often look like the 1, which is the perfectionist. They both want to do well, but they have different motivations. So the 1 wants to do well because it's the right thing to do, whereas the 3 wants to do well because they want to win. They want to succeed at any cost, and they're very good at spinning a failure into a lesson learned or turning it into something completely new. The biggest difference, I would say, between 1s and 3s, if you're considering both of those, is that 1s have an inner critic, and it never, ever goes away, unless they're sleeping. And 3s are willing to see the finish line at any cost. If it means cutting corners or doing something more efficiently, that's what they'll do. A 1 wants the lawn to be mowed the right way, because there's a right way to do things, but a 3 wants the lawn to be mowed because the neighbors will know if the lawn wasn't mowed. So there's a lot of appearance drive there with the achiever. The 4 is known more as the romantic or the creative, but I don't really feel that that's fair or just, because there are many creative types who are mathematicians and scientists. So I like to think of 4s as the innovator. Essentially, 4s are, they do think creatively and uniquely, and often can be poets or traditional artists, but really they are able to take abstract things that maybe we have discarded and gather them together in a new way and create something absolutely stunning and beautiful. I have often just admired my friends on Instagram as well, and they're in design, and they can take things that I would never even stop to look at in, a thrift store, and put it in a room, and it's just breathtaking. How did they do that? It's just incredible. So 4s do have an eye for design, but really it's innovation. The unique way they can gather information and create solutions for other people, whether that's traditional art or if it's science or math. It doesn't have to be just art. 5s are known as the observer. They have a voracious appetite for information. And just going back to 4 for a second, because sometimes people really have a hard time differentiating between 4 and 5. They can both be a little bit more withdrawing and introspective. The difference is that 4s, they really enjoy emotional experiences. So if they're having a deep conversation with somebody, they are thinking, how could we go deeper? How could we make this experience even, grander or more authentic? 5s have a deep need for more information. They actually crave research and understanding, and their core fear is tied to that, not being prepared enough or not knowing enough in order to be an expert in their given field. 4s really like to stand out as unique and absolutely amazing. And 5s do too. They want to be the top dog in their given field. Whatever it is they choose to do, they want to know the most, and they want to be the best at that. So you can start to see how some of these lines would be a little bit blurred. Is it starting to sound a little bit like a 3? To anybody? Yeah? Where they want to achieve and be successful. 5s, it's about knowing information. They just crave that understanding and knowledge. And 4s, it is really about the emotional connection they have to another person. 6s, they are the contributor, and that is so broad, I know. But 6s really can be a shapeshifter. If there is a vacuum of power, somebody hasn't taken charge, they could be the person that steps up, and you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know you were a leader. Okay. And they've thought of everything. 6s can also take a back seat and just kind of watch the person in authority and, take their time trying to figure out if they're going to trust this person or not. It's really interesting. They're like a secret superhero on the Enneagram. They can run into danger and protect the group, or they can hang back and ask the really tough questions. They are like, if a superpower was to be an analyst, that's what the 6s would be. So there really can be so many different shapes that they take. They can often get confused with an 8, one particular subtype of the 6. But we'll get to that. 7s are the enthusiasts, and they crave experiences. So that can look like a 4, because 4s crave experiences. The difference between the two is that 7s crave just really great experiences, like fun experiences, whereas 4s crave emotional experiences. And 4s are the only type on the Enneagram that are comfortable with the whole range of emotions. So if something is sad, they want to feel it. They want to cry every tear that is due. And 7s really have a hard time with the darker emotions. So sadness, anger, fear. It's not that they don't ever feel those things. It's just they know it's a slippery slope. They don't want to go there. They don't want to stay there. They're going to do their best to avoid those darker emotions. So if 4 feels everything, if you think of it like a rainbow, like it's just an arc, they feel it all. They might have all the emotions in one day. 7s really try to stay in the moderate to extremely happy range for the most part, which can be problematic, as we all know. If you've seen Inside Out, you know that's a problem. Okay, 8s are known as the commander. They like to be in charge, and they don't want to apologize for it, and that is wonderful. 8s know that they are a leader, and you know that they're a leader because they often have this presence that when they walk into a room, everybody's like, you just sense it. They just have this weight that they carry, and it's wonderful. Sometimes 8s don't know that they need to be in a position of leadership. They haven't really accepted that fact yet. But when you ask an 8, would you rather be in charge, or would you rather, follow and take direction from somebody else? And they'll say, oh, no, absolutely, I want to be in charge. Some mature 8s have learned to, follow the leader, of course. And there's ways that all of us adapt. None of us are completely static in our type. We all have had to adapt in the world, right? Especially in the last 2 years. But the 8s know they have a big presence, and they like to lead. And that's totally fine. They often love confrontation. So they will kind of seek it out. And if they haven't had a really good spar with somebody, like verbally, they might seek it by challenging somebody out of the blue, just because they need that big energy. 9s are often known as the peacemakers, but I like to describe them as a mediator. They can listen to somebody, say, in your office or your friend group, and totally feel like they're being heard, and then they'll hear the other side of the story, and that person, too, feels like this 9 is on their side. So they can kind of sway to whoever they're with, which is actually a really wonderful quality. They're trying to avoid conflict. So just as 8 is running into conflict, 9s are doing everything they can to maintain that glassy, beautiful surface like Lake Moran. Just like no ripples, no waves. Let's just keep it. 9s are often depicted as a sloth, which I feel is unfortunate because it's really not appropriate or accurate for most 9s. They're very busy. They're very ambitious and doing a lot of things. Of course, any one of us could, have the propensity to be lazy. But 9s, there's something that they're always avoiding. They just refuse to address. So whether that's, their bedroom floor or a relationship that, needs some confrontation and conflict and healthy vulnerability. All right, so that is all 9 types. So your type is determined by your core motivation. What am I seeking? And what am I trying to avoid? And another way of saying that is your core fear. So if you have a core fear of conflict, you might need to read about 9 a little more thoroughly. Typically in my classes, I will go into great depth, giving every kind of scenario and conflict and good quality and bad quality. Of course, we don't have the time for that tonight. But there is so much information out there right now. Like you could go on my Instagram, you could Google so many resources that I will not bore you with that. And probably most of you have already done that. So if you want to go into greater depth, just focus on the numbers if you type in supporter, you might not actually get much on supporter. So just focus on the actual numbers when you're looking for them. And I recommend that you Google the Enneagram Institute. That is where you will find the most traditional and comprehensive look at each type. It will tell you also information about types in relationship with one another. That is also very helpful, and we're going to talk about that at Workshop 3. But it also has the RETI, which is RHETI. That is the only test I recommend. I get asked every time, what test should I take? Because we all want to know. We want a quick answer. We want to know what other people think we are. You do have to pay for it. It's $12, but it is, again, the most traditional and comprehensive look at the Enneagram. There's lots of different versions, and sometimes the questions, the way they phrase the questions, makes it really hard to answer accurately. I will tell you that self-assessment is not the best way, but if you must do a test, and there are some types that just have to do a test, and I'm not going to stop you, but I do recommend that you read or listen to podcasts and give it some time and thought. But if you have to do a test, do the RETI, pay $12. It's like, I don't know, 2 Starbucks? I don't know. But it's definitely a good investment. Any questions about what we've talked about so far? I know this is just the general overview. All right. Yeah. That's a very good question. No, but I think it's a case-by-case thing. There is no broad rule about that. I've also had lots of questions about life circumstance or traumatic events, and there are certainly trends towards certain numbers for certain experiences. But I wouldn't even want to share that because I feel like it would taint somebody's learning process. But a very good question. Yeah. Anybody else? Any question? Yeah. Excellent question. Core motivation and core fear, no. So you are one dominant type. But next week, what we're going to dig into is the arrows that you would move to in stress and growth. So you actually do move. You have movement probably several times a day to 2 other types. And you would take on their core fear and core motivation. For a time, you always kind of come back to your core type. Of course, you do have wings. And some people will lead with that. They'll say, I'm a 6 with an 7 wing and sometimes 3. I've heard many, many different versions. But your wings actually have to shoulder your dominant type. So if I'm a 7, I can only have wings of 8 or 6. I could have 1 or both or none. Wings are less important. I don't want you to feel the urgency to figure that out tonight or anytime soon. It will sort of reveal itself. So your wings really have nothing to do with your motivation or your core fear. It's just behaviors. Just behaviors. So if you can isolate that, that will be helpful. Yeah. Oh man, so many. So many. Like really any combination you could think of. Because, for example, 7 and 4, they really technically couldn't be more different. But still, you'd be amazed. My inbox is just full of questions. I thought, wow, that is I've heard it all. All of them can be confused because there's always something that is similar. Yeah, and which makes it so important for us to know all of them so that we can respect the people in our life and allow their voices to be heard. I think that's the most beautiful thing about it. Anybody else before we move on? Great questions. Yes. That's right. Yeah. Yes. So if you have a question specifically about a number, like what their stress arrow is, I'm glad to answer that. It would take some time to go through each one, but we will do that next week. So I would say, back to your question, most common mistype, did that come from over here? 6 and 1. 6 and 1. Not as common, but they both can be, so there's 3 stances. Aggressive, withdrawing, and I can't think of the word. It's like a supportive type word, but it's, yeah. So 2 is in that supportive stance, and 2's move to 8 in stress. 8s are in the aggressive stance. They're not afraid of anybody, but they move to 2 in growth. So that's where the confusion can come in, like literally. My husband, Phil, he's a 5 and I'm a 7. He goes to 7 in stress, and I go to 5 in stress. So, no, I go to 5 in growth. But it's, there are so many, which actually is really wonderful for our relationship, because I can kind of see when he's spiraling, and he can tell me when I need to kind of just grow up and sit down and do my work. One more question before we move on? These are great questions. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Technically, you probably wouldn't be able to maintain that stress type for longer than like 3 months. Like, there would be, another factor coming into play. But yes, and that is very critical. So that's another thing. If you choose to take that test, please make note of how you're feeling, like in your body, in your mind, like. Maybe wait till you're feeling like yourself. At the end of a really stressful workday or sitting in traffic, that's not a great time to take it, because you're not yourself, just really depleted. The other thing to keep in mind, if you just have to take it when you go home tonight or on the way home, whatever, whatever hat you put on to answer your questions, keep that hat on the whole time. Because often halfway through, there's a lot of questions in this one assessment, is people get worn out, and by question 32, they're like, well, it depends. Am I at work? Am I on vacation? Am I with the cousins and they're driving me crazy? Like, it really, really depends. So whatever hat you have on, keep that hat on for the whole assessment. So answer every question as if you are at home relaxing or you are at work. Pick one or the other, and that will give you more accurate results. Does that make sense? What is shared historically is that the question was nature or nurture. But what is taught is that people are born with their type. But whoever raised you, whatever their type is, everybody has a type, whether they want to believe it or not, that affects how their number expresses. So your behaviors do not dictate your type. Let me say that again. Your behaviors do not dictate your type. You may act like a wild and crazy 7, but really you're a 2 or a 1. That's why it's so important not to type other people, because you just can't tell from the outside. Behaviors are adopted from your family of origin or whoever raised you in your life circumstances. There's lots of ways that we've learned to cope with trauma too, and that affects our behavior. So we just can't judge from the outside. You would be shocked at the number of times I've thought, a person was a certain type, and they say, oh no, I'm definitely this type, and I'll say, okay, tell me more about that. And yeah, turns out they are. But it's something that can only be determined by the person themselves. So it's best to learn about all the types very thoroughly, figure out your own type. Really, don't waste any time typing other people because it might be a waste. All right, let's move on because there's so much more. Power of perspective. So we already know this. We know that everybody has a different perspective. If nothing else, COVID has taught us that. There are just so many ways to look at things, right? But I'm sure most of you have all heard of the old tale of the blind men at the elephant, and they're feeling the elephant, and they're all at different parts of the elephant. One is at the tusk, one is at the ear, one is at the tail, one is at the feet, and they're all feeling very small aspects of the elephant, and not one of them has the comprehensive view of the elephant. But we need all of them to make up the whole. And so I want you to keep this in mind when you're feeling like very frustrated with other people. Maybe, it's around the work table or maybe the dinner table. Every perspective is valid, and the person that rubs you raw the most is the one you need the most. We can learn from one another, and we can grow ourselves by taking the time to listen. And so if that's the only thing you take away from this tonight, that would be my hope. So remember the elephant. We only have a very small view of what's in front of us, but it's not always the full picture. Okay, so you may be asking, how do I figure out my core fear? I don't know about you, but in my family of origin, that's not really something we sat around talking about. Let's talk about core fears tonight, kids. It didn't happen. And that's completely okay. I don't think it's a language we're super comfortable with yet. And so I like to kind of just help people navigate what those questions really look like. What does it mean to unpack all of that? So this is a little bit of a roadmap. Also, people love, did you ever read those choose your own adventure books when you were a kid? Oh man, I would go back and then I'd pick one, and then I didn't want to miss out on anything because I'm a 7, and I'd read, if I had read it the other way, you got to read it. And none of it makes sense, but it was just awesome. I had to take it all in. So this is not an assessment, an official assessment, but it will kind of guide the process, okay? So starting at the top, one of the questions, if you were coming to me and sitting in my office and we were trying to define your type, that was your goal, these are some of the questions I would ask. So do you like being in charge? Is that something you like? Or would you do it if you had to do it? Okay, so if it's if you don't really like being in charge and it's only if you're needed, then do you fear conflict? Okay, if you don't fear conflict, move on and ask yourself, do I watch those in power? Kind of sit back and see, are they trustworthy? I'm going to just test this out. I'm not sure if I like them yet. I'm going to give it some time. Sometimes those individuals who are not sure if they can trust somebody, they will wait and wait. They'll give themselves a certain amount of time, and then once they understand that they can trust that person, they're loyal for life. That is the loyal guardian, the contributor, the devil's advocate. There's so many names for the 6s. Yeah. Do you fear disaster? Okay, so going back up to the top, do I like being in charge? Yes. Do I know what I'm feeling? No. Do you fear being trapped in pain or physically in an elevator? Do you fear being trapped in a position? You won't have any more options, or you won't get to do certain things. All right, back to the top. Do I like being in charge? Yes. Do I know what I'm feeling? Yes. Do I fear failure? Does anybody know what number we're talking about now? Nope. Fear of failure. Yep, that's the 3. Successful achiever. They love to win. All right. One more on this wing. Do I like being in charge? Yes. Do I know what I'm feeling? Yes. Do I fear being misunderstood? What type is that? Anybody know? I heard some rumblings over here that there might be this type in this section. It's probably not a good clue, but who fears being misunderstood? Nope. Nope. 4. Good job. You guys know it. Yep. The 4 wants to be the individual. They can walk into a room and feel like they didn't get the memo. There's a piece missing. Why can't I just be like everybody else? And yet at the same time feeling so happy that they are not like everybody else. There's a fear of being trapped in the mundane, but it's more of an emotional trap feeling and less of a possibility. So for 7s, it's like the possibilities are endless. But for 4s, they just 9 to 5, a really regular mundane life that does not appeal to them in their mind. They can be idealists. It doesn't mean they won't do those things, but if they could dream their wildest dream, they would not pick just the American dream, as we would say. Okay. So back to the top here. Do I like supporting others? No. If you do you have an internal critic? If you do have an internal critic, and that would be like, if you have one. And what's always funny to me is that people who have an internal critic say, like, doesn't everybody? That is universal. Everybody says, doesn't everybody have an internal critic? There is one type in particular that just has a very strong internal critic. Other types might have voices, but the internal critic is criticizing who they are, their character, their intentions, their morality. Do I fear being wrong? What type is that? I kind of gave it away. Were you giving me the answer? Yes, it's a 1. Any 1s here tonight? Would you agree that with the internal critic piece? Yep. One thing that has been very helpful for many of my attendees is naming the internal critic. To name it something funny, maybe an old relative, or a middle name, or a character that you think is awesome. And just thank it for their observation and dismiss it. Just sort of diffuse the power of it, I think is really important, not to give so much weight to that voice. All right, back to the top. Do I like supporting others? No. Do I enjoy learning? Now, these are very broad, sweeping statements, okay? Of course, we all love supporting others. But, we're picking the strongest traits, right? Okay, so do I like supporting others? No. Do I enjoy learning? Yes. Do I fear being unprepared? What type is that? Yeah, that's right. So much more to that type. Very, very nuanced and intricate. All right. Back to the top. Do I like supporting others? No. Do I enjoy learning? Yes. Do I fear being alone? Any guesses? Nope. 2. Yeah. 7 is a great guess, though. A lot of sevens like being, like they can be alone in a crowd. They can go see a movie alone. They can travel alone. They often don't take pictures because they're just in the moment. They just take it all in. Yeah, but twos really do fear abandonment. They really do. Twos will often feel the most hurt when they are not needed. And they would never phrase it that way because nobody wants to be needy. But if they're excluded from a gathering where they would normally be the host or supporting the person of honor, that could be extremely hurtful for a two. And if you've ever had conflict with a two, it's probably around relationships and just not feeling a part of that core or not feeling needed or wanted. That is a huge fear. And so you can begin to see how just knowing these little things about one another is so helpful. It can create more empathy and grace and just help us to slow down and really listen, where maybe we kind of sped past and just saying things like, oh, that person's too sensitive, or, you know, they just got their nose out of joint. I don't even know where that saying came from, but you know, we do these things. We dismiss people and their feelings, and we really don't know what has precipitated that emotional crisis. And so I think this is so key because we can talk about these things now and remove the sting. It's really wonderful. Any questions about this? Core fears. So if you did take a picture of it, just keep in mind that the bottom statements, the questions, that say, do I fear? Those are the core fears. So that's really what you have to familiarize yourself with. If you like, I can just go through and remind you of what each core fear is. So the fear of conflict, the very first one on the top left-ish, halfway down, that's 9. Do I fear disaster? That's 6. Fear of failure is 3. Fear of being trapped is 7. You might hear a 7 say something like, you just don't want me to have fun. I think that was Phil and my biggest argument when we were first married. We've been married like 18 years, but that was a reoccurring argument. It always came back to me saying, you just don't want me to have fun. I didn't know the Enneagram then, but it's really funny. You'll start to see these patterns in your own life too. All right, I can't see that far. Do I fear betrayal? That's 8. So although 8s have this big bravado and presence and commanding, attitude, they really have the softest core of all the types. They fear betrayal. I mean, it's just astounding when you know that about somebody. Maybe you feel that they are just too much, or you've said they're just so aggressive. But they fear betrayal, and that is just this huge armor for them to protect themselves from that. Do I fear being wrong? That's 1. They want to do things right. Do I fear being unprepared? That's 5. Do I fear being alone? That's 2. And do I fear being misunderstood? Right in the center, 4. Any questions? We're so close to time here, but I just go through this very quickly. So what are our core fears show us? And this is really important to remember. We don't want to hang too much weight on our type or our core fear. It's just another way to learn and grow. But sometimes we get it wrong, and that's okay. We just have to kind of have open hands with it. So the core fear is the way that we self-protect. Yes, it is. Does your mode or your behavior that creates self-protection, does it actually protect you? No, it actually creates harm and conflict. There are ways that we can learn to adapt in the world, and it may have worked for us as young children and adolescents, but now that we're fully grown, those are just automatic behaviors that can often lead to conflict. So we need to not accept those self-protecting behaviors and learn ways of maybe shedding them just a little bit. How my behavior impacts my relationships. Yes, absolutely. So my self-protection does impact my relationships because I either push people away or I bring them close. Maybe too close. Does my core fear give me a valid excuse for my bad behavior? No, it does not. No, it does not. If you do learn your type tonight or confirm it, please don't walk away from this room and say, well, that's just the way I am. I knew it. It's great. I'm just going to be me. This is sort of a tall drink of water to take in. It's deep and there's a lot of layers to it. It's very complex. So I urge you that if you do take this challenge to kind of learn more and grow more, to really take it seriously and not use it as a license to continue on as you are. I think if you're drawn to the Enneagram, you love learning and growing. And really keep that in the forefront of your mind, that it's a tool for learning and growing. So if it shows us the behavior that impacts our relationships the most, I would call those blind spots. That's what blind spots are. How my unconscious behavior impacts my relationships negatively. Those are blind spots. So that's what we need to know with the core fear. Is it my true nature? No, it is not. Will it undo all the wrongs in my life? No, it will. It will not. Is it going to allow me to talk about why I do things? Yes, it is. Yes, I really hope you have meaningful conversations after this. I've sat with a few families with their young adult children, high school age children, and just beautiful connections being formed again, because they were just having those aha moments like, oh wow, that wasn't personal. That was just your type. I'll never forget, some of the conversations that Phil and I had when we first uncovered our real types, and we all of a sudden could kind of just relax and accept one another and not make it so personal, some of the conflict. Does it, knowing my core fear, of course, does it enable me to project on others? No. Again, that goes back to license for bad behavior. We don't want that to be what the Enneagram is. But does it create a strategy for next steps for growth? Absolutely. I'm going to leave you with this tonight. This is a lot, but 3 of each of the 9 types fold into one of these categories, either the heart, the head, or the gut. So 2, 3, and 4 are in the heart. 5, 6, and 7 are in the head, and 8, 9, and 1 are in the gut. That is the way we take in information. And it's a lot to kind of think about, because we've already talked about core fears, which is a lot. But here are some questions just to kind of guide you. So I have very big feelings. If that's a yes for you, then do you feel what others are feeling too? Or do you just perceive your own feelings kind of constantly? That's an important question. I feel embarrassed or a sense of shame a lot of the time. That's a very important question. If none of that is true for you, then my most dominant feeling is anger. So you may have big feelings, but you would probably say that most of that is anger. Okay, that would be a part of the gut triad. So we want to go down that line. I don't mind speaking up when someone is wrong. My anger looks like resentment. So some people don't have anger that others can see. There are ones who are very judgmental, we would say. Like they would stop you and say, no, here, let me help you fix that. That's absolutely wrong. And they just have no problem telling you if you're wrong. There are other ones who would see it but not say anything. They would maybe feel hurt and not say anything. And that anger takes the form of resentment. So it's internalized anger. It just all goes inward towards themselves, even though they may be thinking or feeling it about other people. Okay, so I don't have big feelings. I prefer to think through my feelings. Okay, that's going to lead you towards the head. I can't be rushed into a decision. I make decisions very quickly. My brain never shuts down. Okay, these are all the kinds of things that would lead you into one of those centers of intelligence. You don't have to decide. Your type will fall into one of those categories automatically. Okay, so it maybe will confirm or confuse you more. I hope it will confirm the type that you're already headed towards. But I'll encourage you with this. If you've narrowed it down to, say, 2 or 3 types, you are on the right track. And that is a very good and healthy start to your Enneagram journey. If you can eliminate, a handful, that's a great start. You're on the right track. So that is all for me tonight, but I would love to hear if you have any questions. And Josh, you can just feel free to cut me off whenever.
Yeah. Oh. If you guys have any questions, I'll come to you, and then just for the online viewers, and I'll share it into the mic, and then you can answer through your mic. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, we got a bunch. Ben, you want to go first? Oh, yeah, I'll just tell me, and I'll just say it. The question was, do you have any specific Enneagram podcasts that you recommend?
Yes. So, the Enneagram Journey with Suzanne Stabile is probably my go-to. If you're brand new to the Enneagram and you're just starting out, I would suggest The Road Back to You. It's just 1 season of podcasts, and there's a book that goes along with that. There's also a very basic study that you could do with a group. Say you want to get your kids involved. It's a great little study. The Road Back to You. And then after that, typology is great. Most of these podcasts, the format is they interview a guest, and sometimes it's somebody famous, a writer, singer, poet. And what's great about that is that you hear different voices of the type you're considering. Not everybody's going to fit your mold, but yeah, I think that's really helpful. It really helped me confirm. The liturgists have a couple of podcasts specifically on the Enneagram, and they're fascinating. They talk about subtypes. So if you're into that, then definitely check that out. The Road Back to You. Oh, the very first one is the Enneagram Journey. That's my favorite. But if you're just wanting to start at the basics, start with The Road Back to You. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. It does come up a lot, especially when people feel like they have changed so much, or they have adopted a faith perspective or not. Tradition teaches that it stays with you your whole life, but your behaviors can change. And we know that the brain has plasticity. So there is possibility for growth and change. And I think that is what I would want to emphasize to everybody here tonight, that we do have a choice. This is not future telling. We don't know how things are going to be in the future. We know what we have today, but we have choices. We can choose to build up the weaker muscles and make them stronger. And I think being aware of the things that we're not aware of, that we're doing habitually and hurting people with, is a great place to start. So people do change. And they do adapt, even without knowing the Enneagram, of course. But I do believe that the number stays the same. Yeah.
Anybody else? James? Oh, okay. Nice steps in today. Sorry, who is it? Yeah. Why? His question was, why are they only 9? You're a 10. Are you a 10? I'm just kidding.
Good question. So I'll go back to just my original slide. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk too long, but just so everybody can see what I'm talking about. 9 types are based off of the 7 deadly sins plus 2. But they are also on the reverse. So, everybody, we know that we have, our not so great side, our dark side, and our lovely side, our possibility of being virtuous and wonderful. And yeah, those would be known as the virtues. And tradition teaches that all 9 virtues are found in Christ. And so it makes sense. When I teach it to people, I let them know that Enneagram and pentagram are not correlated. Ennea means 9, and gram is diagram. Okay, so diagram of 9. And I see that image as like a crown, and I am a person of faith, and yeah, I just see it as all the virtues are found in Christ, and I can learn and grow from all types.
So we got one here.
These are great questions.
They are. Hi.
Oh, good question.
Yeah, the question was if certain, just for the online viewers, if certain numbers trend towards men or women. Is that what your question? Okay.
Yes. So Phil and I and our 3 kids, we lived in the American South for, not South America, but the American South, for, close to 10 years. And there, it leaned heavily towards 2 for women. And I think that has to do with the culture, hospitality and service and what is expected and what is, frowned upon. But I think that is shifting as people learn and grow and understand the Enneagram more. It's not, we just cannot fall victim to stereotypes with this. It just won't work. Like you will not get any benefit out of it if you allow yourself to think, oh, all women are 2s, or all analysts are 6s, or artists are 4s, or somebody who is very emotional is always a 4. We just can't do that. We really have to look at the core fears and the core motivations. But that's a good question, because I think in its popularity, there have been a surplus of stereotypical types. But any gender, any introverted or extroverted can be any type. There are no numbers that are subject to introversion or extroversion.
Yeah, great question. Anybody else? Oh. Hi. The question is, what are the origins of the Enneagram?
Yeah, great question. So this is the oldest personality assessment or tool. Most people don't even like to use the word personality when it comes to this, because it is much a deeper work, I feel. But it was used by the Desert Fathers, Jesuit priests. I always have a hard time with that, especially this time of night. Jesuit priests. And it was used in, can't think of the word. I do have narcolepsy, I should let you know. Sometimes my brain just shuts down. No, but it was used in mentoring, one-on-one, priest with the monk. And it was used, they would be told what type they were, and then they just had to go away and pray about it. I much prefer the way that it's used in community now. It was oral tradition for many, many years, and unfortunately, it kind of rose to popularity in the 70s with horoscopes and pentagrams, and it kind of got mixed in with all of that. So I think there's so much that we don't know about the brain and human personality and the soul connection and all of that. And so I am thankful that there are people who are willing to learn and grow from historical desert fathers. I think it's great.
Maybe time for two or three. Anybody else? No more? I have one. In regards to the faith stuff, I've had many friends, as a person of faith as well, who have, like we talked about a little bit about, who have challenged that. They're like, it looks like a pentagram or whatever. Can you just address a little bit more, or even like giving maybe someone who is respectful of the Enneagram to maybe someone even from a different faith who doesn't quite understand it, like how they can bridge that gap and open up the conversation and they feel more comfortable with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I have heard many of the strong arguments on both sides. And I love learning. I haven't always loved learning, but I have grown in my growth number, which is 5. And definitely Phil has pushed me in that direction. I think there is so much that I'm hesitant about in psychology. And there's just so much that I disagree with. But I can still learn from it. It doesn't mean I accept it all, but it is a part of my course of study. And I think there's so much that we can learn from different tools. I think it's a shame to dismiss something altogether, mostly because I have seen the benefit with my own eyes. And I think people who maybe feel cautious about it, they should be okay with that. Be cautious if you feel nervous of it or just that's not for you. It's okay. It's not for everyone. But I have benefited from it. I think, if we could sum it up in one word, it would just, it's about being known. Everybody wants to be known. You want people to know you and to not be misunderstood and to be recognized for your gifts and values. And I think if this helps that, if it creates more empathy and grace and forgiveness when we mess up and healthy conversation, then I'm all for it. I know that's probably not a great technical answer, but yeah, I think the more we learn, the more we know we just don't know everything. And if we can gain something positive from these tools, then I say it's good.
Awesome. Can you describe, Marisa, just a little bit about next week's, and then we'll probably end it there.
Yes, absolutely. So we will just do a brief recap if we have sort of the same landscape of folks coming out, and just any questions that you had, because there are things that will percolate for you this week, and it'll come to mind, and you'll be like, oh my goodness, that's so weird. I wonder about that. So keep it in mind, write it down in your phone, bring it back. We are going to touch on the arrows, like I said, the stress and growth, and just about the mutual respect, respecting your own type and not trying to make it different, but being open to growing, and then recognizing that in others and maybe seeing where it's rubbing up against your type, maybe somebody who's creating conflict, how we can better support one another. So yeah, stress and growth.
Awesome. Well, why don't we give a round of applause, guys, for Marisa tonight for her time.